Hi, everybody. Good day to you all. We're going to wait another minute or so here. What is it, 11 o'clock? Thanks for joining us on time. You're a punctual crowd. I wish I had something special for you. We're going to wait just another minute or so for all those latecomers who are running down the hallway back from the kitchen, grabbing a beverage or whatever it is. So another minute or so probably, and we'll get started. I'm going to make a commitment for next year for all these webinars where we have the timer on hold. I'm going to either learn a song, I'll sing, I'll get some drums maybe or something. We'll have a little on hold. I'll figure out something to do for this. Good crowd, people still coming in. That's awesome. Everybody's got a lot of things to do. I know we're getting toward the holidays here. People are not going to be hopping on the webinars next week, I think. I think this is perfect timing. Awesome. Well, it's like watching popcorn, you know, the kernels pop when it starts slowing down with people coming in. I guess it's about ready. So I think we're about ready there. People will still be popping in. And I believe we should be recording as well. So this will be available for replay. So good day, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us today. I'm John Henkel, your Pro AV Product Marketing Manager at NETGEAR. It says so right there on my sweatshirt, so you know that's who I am. Today we're going to talk about Pro AV, and that's why we're all here. And I have some illustrious people to join me today. We have some great discussions that are going to happen. It's going to be one to not miss for sure. Topic is top 10 tips for AV over IP network design. I have three amazing people here with me. We're going to do a lot of cameras. You want to make sure you have your cameras on. There'll be some good laughing and pointing and all this kind of stuff. So first of all, we have who I call the father of Pro AV at NETGEAR, Laurent Massia. He is our Director of Product Line Management for Managed Switches. He's also the Director of the Pro AV Engineering Services team. And from that team, we have two gentlemen here who are amazing talents. We have Alex Pendleton and Derek Fahlberg. They are senior systems engineers and just two of Laurent's team that handle all of the design requests and troubleshooting and helping set up all the AV over IP stuff here at NETGEAR. And they've got a lot of IT background, as does Laurent. I'm going to be here just to moderate and be the color announcer, I guess, like from the sports games here. So we're going to talk about a lot of stories and give you the top 10 tips. But more than just PowerPoint, we're going to have discussions. We also have Keith in the chat and the questions and answers. So put your questions in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and Keith will be there to answer those. And we can also bring them up live and talk about stuff. We want this to be very interactive, as well as you guys can hear some stories on what not to do and also what to do for your AV over IP installations. As a bit of a thank you for coming out and early Christmas present, stick around for the end. And if you're all the way through here from the beginning to end, we'll enter you into a raffle where we choose a name out of a hat, and you will win your very own NETGEAR M4250. That's the GSM 4212P model. And I'll announce that at the end of the webinar. We're going to hopefully be just under an hour for you, so not tons of time, but enough to get some good stories and things. Let's go. I have nothing else to say. So you guys, welcome. Thanks for coming with us. Should be fun. So we talk about the team at NETGEAR and who does all this. This is who they are. And there's three of them right there in some of the photos you see. These guys are all around the world, and they handle network designs. They help figure out what is the right switch, make sure everything configured correctly. So today we want to go through from them. These all came from them, the top 10 tips. So number one, use approved switches. Laurent, you can start us out and make the rounds here. What do you say about this?
All right, John, thank you for having us. So, of course, in this list of top 10, that's the first one, because without a good switcher, when you know that the network is now the fabric of your AV over IP installation, right? No more HDBaseT, no more anything, right? The packets are going through a network, and the switch is the fabric. When the fabric is no good, that's the entire AV install that is ruined. So I'm pretty sure that Alex and Derek have plenty of stories, but I have one for you. Let me start. Actually, you put me on the spot here, but I'm going to tell you a story with one of our 55 certified preferred AV partners, manufacturers we collaborate with. It's a big AV company. They do 1G and 10G all together. We are working with them, closely for many, many years. And earlier this year, in 21, they got a situation. They were putting up a whole system with around 250 ports. So it was like, 10 switches or so. And they were doing AV with 1G video over IP encode decode units. And unfortunately, on this one, they did not consult Derek, Alex, and the Pro AV design team, and they were using very low-end stackable switches that we have at NETGEAR, web-managed, smart-managed Pro switches, good switches for plenty of IT applications, but not for AV multicast, especially when in a big stack situation. And because that's a preferred partner, I said, well, no problem. I'm gonna do it, because we need to help. That's where we are here. So I spent literally 3 hours of my time trying to dig and dig and dig. And really, we tried to do everything we could. But when it doesn't work, it doesn't want to work. Everything that can go wrong goes wrong, And at the end of this 3-hour session, despite the job was commissioned, despite it was a staging environment already, despite that the installation was imminent, we had to, do something. So what I did, well, I took my phone, I called the head of the US sales organization, channel director. We found 10 switches, thanks to the closets and the lab that you can see in Alex and Derek places. And we put together, 10 other switches, approved switches this time for 1G AV encode decode video over IP, and we shipped them overnight. And well, that's a story. And this time, of course, this manufacturer, who you usually use the right stuff, but this time they said, well, that's not a very sensible install. That's 1G quick install. Well, they got the lesson, and now they stick with the approved switches. So it can happen to the largest AV manufacturer. That's the story.
Yeah, John, and
please,
yeah,
Eric, go for it.
I'll add to that. If you look at all of the switches that NETGEAR makes, you can break them down into 3 broad categories: entry-level unmanaged switches, mid-level smart managed switches, and then high-end, what we call our fully managed series of switches. I just want everybody to know that the M4250, M4300, M4500 are considered our high-end fully managed switches. I know it's tempting for a lot of customers to go with a less expensive smart switch. Yeah, they support multicast, I guess. They support some basic quality of service, but they don't have the chipset to be able to handle that kind of throughput in a large Pro AV environment. So when it comes to networking infrastructure, put all your money towards the good stuff and make that good foundation of switches that will be able to handle all of this audio and video traffic. And yeah, like Laurent said, we've had numerous customers that have called us and just pulling their hair out, going, I don't understand why these switches aren't working. And it turns out they went with the less expensive smart. You want to avoid that mistake. So
yeah, you try to save like a few $100s here on a switch,
yeah.
And then you spend how many thousands of dollars in hours of time just because you chose to save $100 on a switch. It's terrible. You want to get the approved switches every time.
Yeah, I think well, there'll be a common theme throughout this whole discussion here about reaching out to you guys first, because after the fact doesn't always help. Like, look, I already have this in, it's not working. Come out to us beforehand with your design, and you'll say, no, don't use that switch, use this one. I also want to say real quick to everybody that have been coming on to the program, this is going to be more of a discussion back and forth. So if you're just looking at the slides, it's going to be really boring. So make sure you get the webcams, and I forget on the audience side how that happens, but make sure you pull the webcams up and engage with us that way if you would. It'll be much less boring for you. So I think that's it. Number one, that's an easy one. Use approved switches for sure. And we're here from NETGEAR, obviously talking and promoting NETGEAR. All these things apply to every other kind of switch out there, really. So of course we want you to use NETGEAR because we know and trust that they'll work. Number two, get training. There's some examples of training right there you can get. There's tons more these days. I think that's been the biggest topic in the AV industry, is getting AV people trained up on IT and the other way around too. So here's some examples. But you guys on the phone all the time and through email have had to find impart some information to people and help educate them along the way. Are you finding that people are getting more educated throughout the last few years?
Oh, yeah.
You've been on? Yeah.
Oh yeah, big time. I think with training, you're never going to know everything. You're always going to keep thirsting for knowledge, and adding the NETGEAR Academy to your your education portfolio is a great way to understand just what you're missing when it comes to the AV over IP transition. There's a lot that you've already learned. I've seen the book, the CTS book. It is deep. There's a lot of information in there, and I don't envy the CTSDs that have gone out there and done it. It's a challenge. The NETGEAR Academy is set not necessarily to be that epic of a challenge, but to give you that missing piece to the information that you might be missing, and the training that you would utilize out in the field.
The other thing I'll say is get with your account manager. Alex and I can do trainings on the side. If you're a partner of ours and you want us to go dive deeper into a training,
We got a long one coming up, don't we?
Yeah, we do. In fact, the one we got coming up, Alex and I, the company asked their employees to first take the NETGEAR Academy training, which is pretty basic. But then Alex and I are going to do a deeper dive, and so that's going to be a lot of fun. The other thing I'll say is, and I don't know if we're touching on this, but hopefully everybody knows about the Pro AV Engineering Design Services team. You can always reach out to us. And I've got, I guess about, I don't know, a few months back, I wrote some configuration guides on how to configure our switches for Dante and for NVX. I've got a Dante
NDI.
I got a
NDI.
QSys, Dante, NVX, whatever, and it shows you how to configure the switches using either the Pro AV GUI or the standard main IT GUI, or even the command line interface. So if you want some configuration guides, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to share that with you.
We can push those out there. And a couple other points too. There's a lot of other manufacturers, like Art mentions in the chat and the questions too. ZV, one of the other founding members of the SDVOE Alliance, has some great training. It's just all of them. Every manufacturer pretty much has some training these days. But I know you can get some good stuff from Art and that training too.
Yeah, let me maybe add that the SDVOE.org Academy is another good one, because of course SDVOE, it's one way of doing AV video distribution using 10G, but the Academy itself, 70% of it doesn't really pertain to the SDVOE technology per se. This is a very, very good, deep overall overview of IP. And well, we at NETGEAR participated a lot, and we hear very good feedback. So guys, if you don't know the SDVOE.org Academy, just take a look. You will have a lot of different small modules, can go fast. You can take exactly what you want out of it.
And I should add in the AVIXA training as well. It escaped me. I apologize, but AVIXA has some awesome training that members can take advantage of there, and of course gets your CTS renewal units, and a bunch of these too have RUs. We have one on our academy that gets you 15 RUs, so check those out for sure. There's a couple of questions in the question Q&A panel as well. I'm sure Keith will get to some of those too, and I think some of these you'll understand as we go through this. What does set NETGEAR apart? That's one of the questions in the Q&A. But let's keep pushing on here a little bit with all these tips. Next one, and this is huge for any kind of application, really, any job in general. Find out the requirements. I mean, what do you need? Because with AV over IP, something's got to give. You can't always get everything you want. So check those out. What have you guys found out about dealing with customers on their requirements? Are they getting the proper requirements?
Well, I could start that real quick. You know, we had a job, really large one, and they came to us early. We designed the network out. It's a really large build. They had kind of like a standardized network infrastructure that they were looking for, so we kind of adhered to that. And we spec'd single mode fiber modules. The company that ran the fiber ran multi-mode fiber, which single mode fiber modules aren't going to work with multi-mode fiber lines. And so, of course, they plugged everything in, nothing's connecting, and they're like, "Whoo, what happened?" Right? And so, yeah, understanding the requirement and what needs to be purchased is critical. And even though we were brought in, that mistakes happen. This was obviously one of those mistakes where there was a disconnect in communication, but making sure that you have the right lines to communicate and understanding the requirement is critical to getting us a network that we can work on that will be successful.
So I got to ask the question: what did you do to solve that problem, Alex? How did you guys fix that one?
We went to it. We found that was the problem. We got those back. We got the single mode modules back. We got the multi-mode modules purchased and in their hands, and away we went.
Cool. Thank you. Derek, sorry I cut you off.
Yeah, sorry. I would say also on top of that, understanding the network topology is extremely important. If you come to us and we're going to help you out with the design, we need visibility as to how this network's laid out. And the typical, most common network topology is going to be the spine and leaf, right? Or hub and spoke, or MDF, IDF, core edge. It's all the same stuff. And so it's really critical that you document the topology of the network, understanding how many ports you need in each rack and how all those edge closets or leaf switches are all going to connect back to the core. So be sure you have a good grasp of the layout of the network.
Thank you, Derek and Alex. And I can actually add the last one, because actually that's a twofold thing, right? You have requirements on the network, and then you might have specific requirements on the EV itself. So of course, we do the network at NETGEAR, right? But sometimes, we can say, oh, that's the network not doing that transition fast enough, when you switch from one source to the other, because your requirements might be, instant fast switching from one source to the other. Latency is another good point. If you have a job in a opera house, if you have artists on the stage and you have cameras, and you want to have their face, singing on the big walls or screens up there, you can't stand any latency, because it's a live, large environment. Everything is going to be magnified, and any delay, and switches won't cause the delay ever. For a switch, there's no good packets or bad packets. I mean, the EV itself, has different characteristics. So we usually don't discuss that much, at NETGEAR, because we do the switching, but find out the requirements. And if you need any help in terms of latency, in terms of resolution, fast switching, scaling, video wall, and so forth, NETGEAR and the entire team will be extremely happy to connect you with our preferred AV partners, of course. Yeah.
Good points, you guys. Okay, so far so good. Number 4, do the math. And this is something, again, you guys tackle all the time, right? People got to consider, especially if you're new to this, more than just the individual streams, but you got to get all of those across the switch or multiple switches aggregated and sent around. So how does that affect your network designs? How does that affect your switches? Tell us about that.
Well, I think the big question comes from whether 1 gig or 10 gig, how they want the command and control, if it's a KVM. It goes back to the previous one, but as you go through the requirement, you get the understanding of what bandwidth needs to be at the core. I designed a network yesterday that they don't necessarily need to send the SDVOE traffic all around the network. So we'll give them about 16 or so streams that they can send at any given time, but they probably will only use about 8. But either way, the core, we're going to afford that amount of bandwidth. There's 5 by 160 gigabit, and so you get 800 gigabit at the core minimum transfer rate. So you have to kind of plan ahead for the larger network. For the smaller networks, obviously the amount of switch ports versus the amount of bandwidth that you can have is fully non-blocking. So the standalone is not as the the calculation goes, but you definitely want to make sure the uplinks and the core can support that if that is the requirement. Now, there's also more math to consider there too, is power over Ethernet, as I'm sure Derek has run into a few times.
Yeah, I mean, this is especially when it comes to video. Audio, not so much, right? That doesn't take up
Right.
a lot of bandwidth, but video certainly does. And let me just say that Laurent designed our M4250 series with bandwidth in mind. Understand that every 8-port M4250 switch has a minimum of 2 fiber ports, whether it be 1 gig or 10 gig. The 24 ports all come with 4 fiber ports, and then the 40 port switches come with up to 8 10 gig fiber ports. And the intention there, I think, Laurent, was to make sure that our customers have abundance of bandwidth capabilities going from the core to the edge.
Part of that engineered over AV over IP right there.
Yep, exactly. So well done, Laurent.
Oh, no, thank you. And let me tell you, what is current might not be true tomorrow or in the future, because you have a proliferation. You don't know, tomorrow, next week, next month, you will have new encoders, new decoders, new cameras, new displays. And if the network is, very stretched, because you did the math, you know exactly how many streams, left, right, left, 1G, 10G, whatever. You need to calibrate that with headroom, and that's what Alex and Derek meant to. It's actually a good rule of thumb to expect, more uplink capacity in the future, because if not, your network will be blocking, and that's not what you want, because AV over IP must be future-proof.
Hey, Alex, remember we were working on an opportunity with 8K?
Oh yeah.
What was the port on those? Was it a 40 gig?
40 gig, yeah. So in the demonstration that Semtech did in their video has a 40 gig QSFP plus port coming into the network. That's a 40 gig port off of the encoder. So I mean, 37.5-ish gigabit stream. That's a lot of bandwidth. I mean, that's a ton. So
technology never stops, guys, and just bandwidth requirements are always going to increase over time. So we have to adjust for that.
Is there some kind of percentage you guys, it is probably not default, you say you plan for X amount, then you say add 10% headroom, or it just kind of depends?
Or should be half. We should standardize on 50%,
Honestly, the old network techs will tell you in the IT world, you go double. You double what you're planning for, because there's always, and in AV I would say this is absolutely true. There's always change. It's an evolving situation. Even though we 2 months ago we got this design and we built it this way, there may be additions that happen in that 2 months that increase the amount of bandwidth you need, or the amount of ports you need. So the amount of change, being flexible to that is key.
That makes sense. Okay, moving on. Number 5, use VLANs. And I know this is kind of new for a lot of AV people like myself too, but people talk about separating the network or creating a separate network. Well, this is the way to do it, right? Use VLANs, virtual local area networks, for those of you who don't know what it is. And it's just the best practice. And I know, Laurent, I've heard you on other webinars talk about this all the time.
That's right. So let me I know we need to be fast, and it's not going to be long, but I need to set the stage here a little bit, because it's not bad, okay? Because for a lot of AV customers and users or installers, VLANs, oh my God, what was that? So in the IT world, VLANs, always been there, right? Because you want to protect some, finance from sales organizations. You put them into specific broadcast domains, and also this way you can reduce the broadcast domain in such a way that you don't have too much broadcast killing a network. So my first point is that in the EV, we need to be realistic enough, right? If it's a small installation, so I don't know, a house of worship or a classroom or conference room, with 1 or 2 switchers, I mean, VLANs are not going to bring much to the table, right? So it will be in most cases, but of course, Alex, Derek will always tell you, you have corner cases sometimes, NDI, Dante, NDI4, MTCP with Dante. It's not great, okay, because they kind of conflict each other. But in the most instances, it's going to be all right to go with the same VLAN in a small install. But now you need to think that if this is a mid-large or a larger installation, then you have those behaviors and protocols and multicast and several packets. They might conflict with each other, and yes, then this is a best practice to put every type of traffic into a specific VLAN. But above all, there's one thing you want to protect in a AV network, the same way we want to protect it in an IT network. That's the management. That's the control, because you don't want to lose control, right? So maybe Alex and Derek will comment, but yes, in most of our installations, we like to have a dedicated control VLAN, so that this VLAN can touch everything, but is never impacted by multicast, because some of those touch panels, they don't like multicast much.
And
Yeah.
not to mention PTPv1 and PTPv2. You have to kind of look at VLANs. I call VLAN as the hard barrier because it is literally creating its own world for that communication on the switch. Then IGMP being like a soft barrier where it snoops and it roams those ports within the VLAN and protects the multicast from flooding other ports that's not subscribed. That's kind of like the soft barrier. It just depends on the scenario, right? If you have a specific signal that's going to use a certain queue or might utilize a specific class of service, or maybe there's not enough ARP entries on one segment, you can VLAN those off and utilize that as well. I mean, it just depends on the scenario, really.
Yeah, and listen, we understand VLANs can be confusing when you're configuring VLANs. We do this tag, untag, and then God help us, it's the PVID. And the good news is with the M4250 series, we have I'm sure you guys already know this, the Pro AV GUI that has these pre-configured profiles. And so we try to make your lives as easy as possible when you're configuring our switches. Just open the profile for the appropriate type of device, enter a VLAN. If you want to route on the VLAN, enter an IP address and select your ports and click apply, and it'll take care of all that confusing VLAN stuff in the background. So I think that's a big advantage of using NETGEAR's M4250 is the ease of which you go about configuring these switches for VLANs and so on and so forth.
That's a good point. I think what I've heard from doing other webinars and other meetings in general with our partners, that people or education is great. Of course, you want to be able to learn about all this kind of stuff. Our interface is awesome that it does all this stuff for you automatically, but you should still know what the heck is going on, right? Don't just hit a button and say, okay, I made a VLAN, but understand what's going on. And I'm talking to myself too for this. I talk about this, but I don't know all the details behind the scene. I should know more about this too. So that when you do go into a situation and have a discussion with an IT manager, you can talk intelligently and they're not going to go just, shove you off or whatever because you don't know what you're talking about. So yes, we do make it easier, but make sure you still know what's going on behind the scenes.
Hey guys, sorry.
Keith?
Yeah, quick question from the panel here, if I may interrupt. It has to do with VLANs. Is there any disadvantage from a performance standpoint if you don't have contiguous ports assigned to VLANs?
So you're talking about having a VLAN that does not have contiguous ports, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah. So it's in the default VLAN? Would that be the?
Well, what I'm assuming from that, I saw the question too. That's a good question, Keith. So say you set it up for port 1, port 8, and port 13.
Oh
But they
yeah.
aren't.
Oh,
Okay, so
doesn't
let me make it easy. Answer is
Yeah.
no difference. I
Not
mean,
at
the
all.
switch doesn't care. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, because you just cut the switch in small pieces, but that's a very short path between port 1 and port 9.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no penalty whatsoever. It doesn't take more time to go from 1 to 9 than 1 to 2. I can tell you
Yeah.
that's still sub microsecond transfer. Yeah.
An awesome example of that is the M4500, which has a grouping of 4 ports. So every 4 ports is a port mode, right? And it still switches. It still switches at extreme speeds at very low latency, and it's literally using in groups of 4. And we, in some of the lags that we configured there, we didn't even configure them in a row. We did 49, 51, 53, and 55, right? So it's, I mean, it just really doesn't matter at all.
Hey,
Thanks, guys.
Go for
John.
it.
Yeah, John. One other thing is I've actually had customers ask me, "Hey, if I fill up all the ports, is it going to, affect the performance of the switch?" You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, I'm going to use all 48 ports. That poor switch, it's getting just bogged down now. And the reality is that's not the case.
Right.
The backplane is sufficient. It has enough backplane to load up all those ports and not affect performance whatsoever. So do not ever be concerned about maxing out your switch.
Standalone switch, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you buy a 48 port switch, you can use all 48 ports. I assure you.
we publish some of those specs too. You'll see it in the data sheets and things, right? The switching fabric and the
Yep.
backplane speed, things like that. And I remember seeing those as I was putting them on the website, and it's amazing that it is built in. It's designed that way. Again, designed for
Absolutely.
AV over IP, but designed in general, well designed. So plenty of room. Cool. I'm going to keep moving on. We could, like all these things, we could talk for hours on this stuff. It's great. We have an hour though. Number 6, this I kind of relates to bandwidth as well. Really, remember ports are duplex. And these are things that, like the last question, almost that you guys think are trivial almost, but these are things that us in the AV world would know and think of sometimes. That these ports are duplex, so that affects your design and how you build things out, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this time,
So-
this is a, oh, sorry, Alex. This time, this is a good, right? This is not a bad thing. This is good because it is helping the installation. Of course, in the old, maybe digital world or even analog before, you got to transmit and receive. It's kind of separate in the AV world, but switches, they can transmit and receive at the same time with the same bandwidth. That's what we call duplex. It's not marketing. It's really 1G left to right and 1G right to left. That's what it is, or 10G or 40G or 100G. So the point here is that it's a good thing, because if you have a group of encoders and decoders left and another group of encoders and decoders right, you can profit from the same duplex link, and it cuts in half your potential needs in terms of uplinking. So that's a good thing to know. And again, that's why you should come to the ProAV design at NETGEAR.com team more often, because Alex and Derek and the whole team will help you design, just what you need. And because of that duplex, then you can then plan for the future with more headroom. But duplex is a good thing. Don't be afraid of that.
100%.
That was easy. Cool. That's a good thing. I know there's no discussion on the good things. You're like, well, yeah, it works. It's to your favors, but cool.
Yeah.
Here's one that I know is a term that people latch onto here and there, and I see it tossed in some forums on Reddit and other places too. That QoS. And from what I've learned from you, Laurent, that's where a lot of these things came from too. Is QoS is not magic. It's not going to correct everything in your system. So talk about some of that stuff, some of the horror stories there.
I will certainly let Alex and Derek tell some stories about QoS, but yes, there's a lot of myth, right? So where does it come from? Well, it comes from IT, because IT networks are blocking, right? They don't have enough bandwidth edge to the core because nobody needs it in the IT world. PCs, stations, they all sleep all day long, so that's burst traffic only. So with QoS, when you have a bottleneck somewhere, guess what you're doing is that you are going to prioritize some kind of traffic, typically in the IT world, the phones, the voice, right? Voice over IP. But it comes at a cost, because guess what is happening at the bottleneck when the voice packets are prioritized? The other packets, well, there's a little bit of buffer on the switches, so maybe some of it will be buffered, but most of the packets will be just dropped. Because guess what? If you are sending an email, a big thing to Derek, your email will get there, be dropped, and no matter what, the email server, your Outlook, will resend it again later, because you have this communication. But in the AV world, doesn't work. You don't want to have your audio or video dropped. You can't, and you will not find enough buffers to buffer things up. So QoS is really not, what will save a situation at all.
And to what Laurent's talking about, so the cubicle, right? You set up a PC, and then you have a phone, and then you connect the PC to the phone. It's got a pass-through port that goes, and you're utilizing the same connection, the single port connection going into that switch, and you segregate those by prioritization. One of those is expedited forwarding, or QoS value 46, which I applaud all the audio manufacturers out there for taking advantage of that, because it brings me back to the old times when we had to make sure that was configured correctly on the switch for these combination computer VoIP systems, and I love that we can do that. It's like changing a lane on a freeway, right? All traffic comes into Q0 because the value of the packet is 0. But then an audio packet comes into the switch, it changes that 0 to a 46, and then we change its lane on the freeway and give it its own proprietary, carpool lane, if you will, and then it goes off and is able to execute wherever its destination is. So it's a benefit, and it is being taken advantage of by a lot of AV manufacturers out there. QSys has their list on their website of what you need to configure for quality of service. We've prioritized them kind of out of the gate. I mean, we've given them higher priority than normal traffic, but you can actually go in, configure them very easily, and make sure that they're set. Now, when you do the M4250, the profile will do it for you. Yeah. Okay, so if you select audio with Dante or audio with QSys or video with QSys audio, any of these profiles, it'll configure the quality of service, so you don't have to go in there and do it yourself.
Yeah, or like you said, by the way, I use that same analogy when I do my trainings. I like the carpool lane analogy,
yeah.
But yeah, go to Dante or Autonate or QSys, and they'll tell you exactly how to set the quality of service. Or, like you said, Alex, just take advantage of those Pro AV profiles, and we'll do it for you.
Wanted to note real quick, you saw that little overlay I dropped in there. I should have this on every slide, just along the way. And if somebody comes and goes, here's the email address to contact these guys and figure out what you need to do for your AV over IP network. We'll show this at the end as well, but I wanted to make sure that's up there. ProAVDesign@netgear.com. Always available 24/7, as these guys can attest. So next tip here, we're coming up on not bad, 11:38. We're doing good. Design in scalability, and you talked a bit about this earlier too, but it's really deserves its own point, because you just never know. And you guys are sort of new to AV. You've been doing this for years, but still not 30 years of AV, where people know that this stuff always changes. I want 2 conference rooms. All of a sudden, here's a 3rd one, or whatever. Stuff just always gets added in, so you can't be locked in. And that's a big overriding feature for AV over IP in general, versus the matrix switchers of old, where you have one chassis with all the slots of everything. You're done. Now you want to add 4 more inputs. Well, you got to buy a new chassis. So that's a big selling point for AV over IP, is you can scale it quicker with a network switch. Just add some more ports, add some more encoders, decoders, you're good to go. So scalability.
Yeah, I can't resist. So I'm going to go first again. After that, I stop. I promise, Alex and Derek. You go.
No, you're good. You're good.
You're good, man.
There's always a lot going on with the 1G AV over IP. The 1 gigabit Ethernet. So because it's cost effective, it's easy, right? It's every gigabit is everywhere, right? So we all know that. So of course, AV over IP at 1G is very popular. But popular doesn't mean cheap, you know, because of course you can do some 1G AV over IP with a couple of switches in a daisy chain or cascade, as we used to say in the old days. But, you know, instead of that, we take 10 streams or 20 streams, you know, of 1G that's already 20 gigabits. And instead of daisy chaining or doing a horizontal line, you know, go for a 10G core, for instance, because that is designing in scalability. Because with a 10 gigabit core, you will hook up your switch more directly to the core. The communication is going to be much faster. And then you have plenty of room for future expansion. Yeah, that's one example.
So far, I would say from the Pro AV Design Center, I don't believe, and Derek, you'll have to keep me honest here, maybe Laurent too, that we have ever had a network that we designed there that was not scalable. We've designed networks with the next in mind, right? The next stage or the next event or the next growth period. There's been a lot of pushback on us as we've designed these networks, obviously, because they're like, well, we want to min max or whatever, but you know what? You've got to go towards, okay, this is what we'll build today. We also need to be ready for tomorrow. And that's, I think, a great offering from our design center so far is that we're looking at the eventual modification to that network. I mean, I worked on a design, the American Dream, you know, it's been one of the funnest designs to work on. And they added an entire segment after we had already done the design, built everything in. They added an entire new wing of that segment. So we had to be flexible there. We had to have the availability to add to it. We couldn't just min max.
Yeah, and you know, I was just thinking about another customer, PGA Tour.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and they were gonna have some of their screens on the PGA Tour's network, but those switches weren't capable of handling video. So they decided to put everything on the NETGEAR AV network. And so they bought a bunch more switches. One of the questions I got is, if we add more switches, is this going to compromise performance? And the answer is no, it's not. You can scale out as much as you want. Just make sure you've got the appropriate amount of throughput between the switches is probably the most important aspect. So yeah, and then one other thought. We have the right gear to scale as well. We have switches, for example, the M4250, a 16 port 10 gig switch. On the M4300, we got 24 port, we got 48 port, we got 48 port stack, and then we got even a big 96. We can do one switch with 96 10 gig ports. And remember, all 10 gig fiber ports are backwards compatible to 1 gig, so you can mix or match as needed. Right, Laurent?
Of course, that's a good point. So yes, no savings, you know, for scalability. I mean, core is something that must be taken into account. That's right.
Right.
And that's why you use the experts like these guys to make sure to remind you of those things. Okay, here's a sort of a controversial topic that I know I've talked about on other webinars with Laurent too. It's create a dedicated AV network.
Oh man,
this term convergence, right? We've been hearing for years and years, and here's a good time to talk about it. So, you know, I know we advocate separate networks, but why is that, and what problems have you seen when it's converged?
Whew, okay. So
where do I start, right? You're like, oh
yeah,
man.
Yeah, because the IT networks as a whole, they've got a lot to them. They've multi-layered, a lot of security. They've got also a lot of IGMP that's possible for different things that they might be doing. You know, and when you have an AV network, it's okay to connect a link out to them. You know, have them isolated on their own VLAN for access, remote management, stuff like that. But if you think that you're going to go ahead and take an existing network, multi-switch network, and add just a VLAN for AV flooding that is going to take place, that is not an appropriate solution for an AV network in the modern day. maybe back when signals were 100 meg or something like that, maybe that would probably be okay. But in today's infrastructure, where we're going specifically, I mean, me and Laurent were talking this morning about 4K and the adoption of 4K and how that's kind of come into AV networks more and more. The next hurdle there for AV to get to is 8K with 8K content. I mean, these are going to be large bandwidth signals. You don't want that on the standard IT infrastructure. You don't want to burden that network with any of that. You want to isolate and if at most provide a link for management.
Yeah, I think that's the most common scenario. I see that all the time. You know, I know a lot of you guys out there have your customers that have their own in-house IT department with their in-house IT network. And they're typically like, hey, you take your AV stuff and you keep it away from our stuff, okay?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
the ones that are really sharp do that for sure.
And they do. And in fact, I got to tell you, Alex, I can't think of a customer that has fully integrated a new AV system into their existing IT network.
Not one that hasn't had problems, that's for sure, for years. I'm not talking about like a couple months of issues. I'm talking about years of problems to resolve.
Yeah. Yeah. And the most common scenario is they go, hey, listen, the client is going to give us, carve out one VLAN for us just so we can tap into our network from the outside and manage these new NETGEAR switches and this new AV system. And that's fine. You know, that's cool. And that's about it. That's all you want to do.
That's all you want to. You want to use that hard barrier of VLANing so that you can set up a VLAN for them to access. They can even provide DHCP from their network so that it's a thing. And then you create a static route in their network to come back to that network for the other VLANs that you might be using, and you're good. After that, don't even try to integrate with another network. Go ahead, Laurent.
I'm sorry, I can't resist. So I need to add something to the dedicated AV network because you remember we got the question, why you guys NETGEAR are so special? Why is that, right? What do you do special? Well, what we do special in the so-called AV line, so the M4250s, for instance, the latest small ones for 1G AV over IP, what we do special is the multicasting because we found a way to stop the flooding of multicast to the IGMP carrier. So we don't have time today to explain why all damn Ethernet switches in the world flood multicast to the carrier, but that's how IGMP works. So we fix that. So the problem is that a typical IT network, they won't have this technology. You know, they will have standard IGMP, and you will flood and literally kill an IT network if you inject not even 4K or 8K from Alex, discussion, but just, typical 1G, because it's a lot of different 1G streams that might be even dangerous for the IT network.
I got to say one more thing too. I got to say one more thing. Packets aren't just packets for the person that said that out there. He said packets are packets. He tried to do a converged network and we saved the day. I mean, we came in, we realized they messed up, so we put a new network in, and that center is up and working. And the AV team at that site is very happy with us, and will continue to do business because of that. The way that went was brutal for the person that thought packets are packets.
I'm not sure if this is an easy question to answer, but so you talk about separate AV network and IT network, and maybe the control is on the IT network and bridging that. How do you bridge that in a nutshell? How do you get that control system to be on the IT network, reach out to the internet if it needs to? How do you do that?
The best way is to utilize a layer 3 VLAN interface, because the VLAN interface can be a static IP, it could be a DHCP requesting IP. So as soon as it's plugged into the IT network, it could get a DHCP on whatever subnet the IT people want. And then after that, it has a link to that network. Now, if you have other VLANs or other layer 3 VLANs on that switch, you'll need to make that router aware of those VLANs. And that's another thing the design team will work with the customer on, or the integrator on how to get that working and what we need to make that effective.
I guess I saw a light bulb go off in my head. That's just one happened there. I'm like, oh, yes. So I love talking to you guys. I learn more every time. And again, don't forget the Pro AV Design at netgear.com. ProAVDesign at NETGEAR.com. Okay, so we're coming down toward the end here. We're going to have room for some questions at the end, which is great. But lastly, and this has been this. You guys already talked about some of this, but
Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.
Well, see you.
So try the prime rib. We'll see you. I'm out.
oh,
Nice talking to you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
right.
Last but not least.
A module's a module, right? Is this like a packet's a packet? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just give you one example. I was working with a customer, and everything was up and running. This is a multi-switch, obviously a multi-switch network, and everything was fine. Then I got a call or an email, and they said something's wrong with your switch. I can't get to the GUI, and it's slowly loading, and we're having all sorts of video, issues and da 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 da. Okay, so we log in. We're checking out the configuration. Everything looks good. Multicast is performing perfectly. And it just, you're pulling your hair out, and it's just like, what's causing? And so I did a ping, right? A constant ping, and like every 3 or 4 pings would reply, and the rest were all timeouts. And so eventually we started looking at the physical layer, layer 1, and this is, that's cabling and everything. And they had purchased, and I'm sure everybody knows about these products, the FiberStore modules, 10 gig FiberStore module. So, okay, well, we're going to change out the modules on each end of this fiber uplink. And they did, and boom, everything started working fine. And it's just like, oh man. And so I looked up that model for that FiberStore, and this is a 10 gig multi-mode fiber transceiver, and it was $24. I don't know if I'm allowed to say pricing, but you can go online and search it for yourself. And it's just like
public knowledge.
I mean, how much quality can be packed into a $24 10 gig transceiver? I don't know how you make a profit.
It goes even deeper than that. They themselves do not make that module. They take whatever they can grab and then they sell it. Now, I have nothing against that company. I think they're fantastic.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
they're doing us all a favor by giving us modules that our customers can use. But you've got to understand that it is a risk. You might have a working system for like 3 months and it'll be great. You'll enjoy it. But then after that 3 months, all of a sudden that module might go down, and then you'll have to replace it. And it will have to be debugged ahead of time. So that's man hours to try to find out what the problem is. The only thing I can tell you that I know that we have over the last 2 years been able to achieve with our engineering group is that the ProAV design team, we've pushed them to make sure that the modules we offer, and I'm not trying to sell you on it. I'm not trying to sell any modules. I don't care about selling modules. I just want a working system. My goal is a working system that you don't have to worry about. You set and forget. If you purchase NETGEAR modules, I can tell you that we will test that against AV signaling. I can tell you that. I can't confirm that from a company that does not make their own modules, takes whatever cheap they can get, whatever good margin price they can get, and then throws them out into the marketplace. I can't confirm that that's going to be a working system for the longevity of that system.
Yeah, it is definitely. It's you're rolling the dice.
Right.
It may work.
Playing with
it
fire.
may work for a while, and then one day you got network problems, and it's. I don't know about you, Alex, but it's hard to diagnose those things.
It's terrible. We spent my entire Christmas 3 months trying to diagnose module issues that were related to the inner working of that module. And the only thing that we could see in the system was that there were received checksum errors, and these are just validation on the incoming packets just before they arrive. They validate that packet, and these checksum errors just continue to fail and then create a really big problem for streaming, because these are UDP packets. Maybe TCP not so bad, because sure, you can retransmit, right? But UDP, a video coming through, that's a very significant drop off.
All right. So just conclusion on that, because thank you for the good off, guys. I really thought you were going away, actually. to be very clear with you guys, as soon as we have a troubleshooting situation in the Pro AV design team at NETGEAR, we like to ask you to collect for us the tech support file.
Yeah.
And the first thing we immediately go to is the physical layer 1, the forward correction errors, the FCS errors, all the material errors on fiber ports. And believe it or not, but the vast majority of those issues come from defect transmit and receive on the transceivers. And the only reason is that for sure for $24, they have 20 or 30 or even 40 different vendors that they just pick, depending on the supply, and there's no quality control. So that's why too bad to bet on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all good stuff. I know you can go on and talk about some of those specifically, but no need. It's okay. So there's the 10. Use approved switches, get training, find out the requirements, do the math, use VLANs. Don't forget about duplex on the ports. QoS is not going to cure everything for you. Scalability in your designs, create a dedicated AV network, and use quality modules. But this is like a subset of 100 that we could do. We could do this webinar every week probably with different tips. So this came from just a little background. I sent an email out to this whole design team of what is a dozen people or so, I guess now, and got all this input from people to say, what are you guys hearing? So this isn't just us making this stuff up. These are true discussion points and problems they've seen in the field and want to help correct. And these guys do an awesome job. So the number one tip, don't forget, is to contact us before the installation, preferably, so we can help set everything up and make sure you're doing it correctly. Even if you know what the heck you're doing, it doesn't hurt. It takes a moment or two to email somebody your design and just, bounce it off just to make sure it's cool. And that's how you get to us. So we got some time left, a minute probably. Unfortunately, not enough for all your questions, but that's the email address to find everybody. This webinar will certainly be available afterwards as a recording. It'll live on forever in YouTube. So we got to be careful what we say, right? It'll be on for forever. But I do want to make sure we get in time here to announce a winner of our M4250 AV line GSM 4212P. And from a random list of the attendees who are still here, I was going to make sure they're still around because that's a requirement. Nicholas Taylor. Nicholas, you are the winner of a NETGEAR 4250. So you need to email us. I don't think I have it on here. I forgot to put that. Yep. Email NA Channel Marketing. It's a mouthful. NA Channel Marketing at netgear.com. Or you can email that list and look it to us as well. But email us your contact info, where to send that to you, and we will get that sucker out there as probably a post-Christmas present, I'm sure, with all the other holiday stuff. But
hey, John.
Yes, please.
I've got to address this one question that just came in for Alex. For Alex, do you think the Packers will be victorious in the Super Bowl by David Thorson?
Oh, nice.
I do. I do.
Answer that question.
They gave us a scare this Sunday, but I do believe the Packers will be in the Super Bowl. They're looking hungry, and they got to do it for Aaron. So hopefully, because I think Aaron's going to go somewhere else, probably the Steelers or something next.
Yeah, you better enjoy him while you got him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And Alex, I answered that already, and I said, of course not.
Always some issues. Well, we can stick around if you guys want another couple minutes. I know Derek may have to run to 11.
Yeah, Derek's got to go.
Hey,
but if
thanks,
you guys want
everybody.
to stick around and answer some more questions
Thanks,
for
Derek.
a couple of minutes, I'm game for that. Cool. So we'll look at the questions area here, and then we'll stick around. Lots of good feedback in there. Of course, we sell modules, yes. So Michael Solomon's asking, Laurent, he said, will there be an updated webinar or training for high availability spine leaf deployments? He was thinking back to his calls with you in mid-October about AES 67 and Dante failover between leafs and between spines for live events broadcast. So
yeah, this is a very valid point, and the answer is yes. In fact, we are right now trying to even go further in terms of high availability when it comes to advanced multicasting in a redundant spine, because this person was pulling the cable, on purpose to disconnect the left spine switch or disconnect the right spine switch. And of course, when you have PTP going on with Widel, Bolero systems, when you have your audio with AES67, when you have your video with NVX across a large spine leaf, this failover at the spine is slightly overwhelmed sometimes. So it is absolutely correct. In fact, we took this case to rework considerably our stacking algorithm for NSF. So let us work on it again a little bit more this month. And yes, we should definitely go back to that topic, John, next quarter, January, February timeframe. Good point.
And I should point out too on the Academy, the NETGEAR.Academy, it isn't on this slide earlier, we have some new trainings coming up, and we're really looking at going into an in-depth, probably M4250 configuration and troubleshooting training classes that'll be available sometime, hopefully Q1 of next year. But we are looking into more advanced training for all this stuff, and some concepts like this would be good. Another quick question that had come up. There are stuff we can't talk about, but are there plans for other 4250 switches and things? So, stick around. We can't talk about stuff that's too far out, but boy, do we have some fun things that we can talk about in Q1 sometime.
Yeah,
I say
Barcelona. Come to Barcelona at ISC. We'll show that.
Yeah. I say this all the time when people ask that question. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, right? There's so much more we have for you. I promise.
Well, I got to try to wrap things up here, I believe, because I know I have to run to something. It's so busy these days. Really appreciate all of your time here, everybody. We stuck around to the end. We had a great audience. You guys, the guests, are fantastic, and I really enjoyed the discussion. We'll do this again for sure next year and do some more stories. In the meantime, we will email you a link if you signed up for it and you're here, or if you registered for it and are not here, if a coworker or somebody wants to get it, there'll be a recording made and we'll put this on our YouTube channel and all that stuff. So look for it there. Have a great day and very happy and safe holidays. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for coming by.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.